Welcome to Roxy on Art. I'm Roxalena, and today joining our discussion is Estian Coetzer. Thank you for joining us today, Estian.
No problem.
So, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well,
as an individual?
you guys know my name, but
You already know me.
Yeah, you already know me, but I'm Roxalena's boyfriend right now. Hopefully for...
Yeah, I was going to say right now, excuse you.
But yeah, so right now I work as a mine engineer at Mosaic Potash. I'm currently working at K2 mine. I studied mining engineering with Roxy in Ontario at Queen's University, where we first met. And yeah, I guess those are my qualifications for being here.
That's my story.
That's my story.
And I'm sticking to it.
What is there more that you want to know?
No, that was a good background. I enjoyed that.
No,
It was a good background story. Yeah. Yeah, well, like the biggest thing I wanted to get out of this is to really stress the importance of art and creativity and its inherent quality in humans, and how, you know, honoring, I guess, that inherent quality will transform your life and also the lives of people around you. With creation, you inherently share as well. It's an expression, and expressing requires another party involved. So it's not only just about helping yourself, but being able to share those creative gifts that you have to offer to others really can transform other people's lives. And I guess a big thing I want to highlight on with my guests is look at what they're doing, but also look at the impact they have. Yeah.
And what do you see yourself contributing?
This show! Well, I would like to contribute a lot more to the town because I do realize its significance, and it's something that's really significant to me. Everyone kind of has their roles, and, you know, things that they do, they're important to the community. You know, working at the mine is important for the community. Working at, you know, different things is important for the community. And I feel as though my role that I can excel in the most is to create a space that inspires people, to create something that has personality and distinction and has meaning to it because it has such distinct personality. Once you kind of individuate something, it does create meaning to it because now it is different from the rest. It is something, and I think that's what we need. Things aren't like, this is kind of, I guess, a stretch, but everything around us, you need relativity to understand it. Like this table isn't actually hard. It's hard to me. I feel it's hard, but this isn't actually hard. It's only hard because of the relativity to myself.
Yeah, like if an elephant stood on it, it wouldn't be hard.
It wouldn't be very hard at all. But like, you know, temperature as well. Nothing is actually cold or hot. If it could be -60, that's actually not cold. It's only cold to your relative, I guess, like receptacle.
It's actually pretty warm if you take absolute zero to be a reference point.
Exactly. Again, it's your reference points, it's your relativity. And I feel as though if people express their individualness, their creativity, then we would have a much better relative scale of understanding ourselves and our world.
Since you have much more reference points to stand on.
Yeah, exactly. The fewer reference points, the less, I guess, you can actually understand an experience, which is what we're all going through. It's just an experience.
Yeah, and I guess there is some of that going on in the world as it is right now. With, you know, if you look at American news, it's all somebody, you know, sticking to their side of the argument versus another person sticking to their side of the argument, where nobody has a reference point within the other person's realm.
Or people who do exist in the middle are kind of disliked by both for their, like, oh, well, you believe particularly in this, so therefore you're not on my side, right? But the more points and reference points that we honor and actually have access to and that we express, because we only have access to so many if we individually express it, right? And the more that we have that, we realize there are no sides at all. It's just a spectrum. And you can't create a spectrum without all these individual points.
Yeah.
Because if you only have 3 of them, well, that's 3 groups. That's not a spectrum anymore.
Mm-hmm.
When you have 100 of them, it's now a spectrum, because now all the different nuances that can exist are actually expressed.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's less confusing for people. Like, it's very confusing if you can't relate to something in the world. Like, you have something inside you, but you just don't understand it because there's nothing relatable outside. Well, these, pieces that you don't really understand from yourself, you can get those relations through other people's points of view. The fewer points of view, well, I don't understand this thing about me because I've seen it expressed by no one else.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to understand it, but I'm trying to understand it with the reference points that exist. So it's always going to be kind of convoluted
Mm-hmm.
when there's less.
So do you see art as a means to convey these reference points or ideas? Or
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think art is a really fundamental tool for expressing different different knowledge bases, experiences, and information. Because,
Yeah.
Being able to like read and write and do things like that and talk to someone, those are all really great, but those are only particular mediums, and they can only show so much. Each one has its limits, and each one has its capabilities. So with art, you're exploring essentially an infinite realm of mediums. Mm-hmm. So like anything really can be viewed as art, because everything isn't art until a human looks at it. Mm-hmm. Art is human interpretation. That's all it is.
Reference to Catherine Miller's, I know she was on the show earlier, and I listened to some of her music and stuff. She really portrays Saskatchewan life and prairie life through her music in a way that you couldn't necessarily describe through words. So that provides reference points for people who might not necessarily have any experience with the prairies to now see what it means to this person.
Yeah.
And that's just one of many ways to describe a certain point.
Yeah, you're kind of pressing another point of art is all about showing feeling, right? Mm-hmm. You can tell someone, I'm depressed. But you can also write a song about what you're actually feeling, and that conveys so much more than just, a word that we've, created.
Yeah.
To talk about something that's like huge in scope. When someone says depressed, it does not mean the same thing across the board. Mm-hmm. Well, how do we understand this sort of phenomenon that we all really experience, but in different ways? Mm-hmm. Well, you do it through mediums that allow you to express a feeling, to show that feeling.
I wonder if that would be useful for things more so in the clinical view of different, intensities of different, I don't know if disease is the correct thing, or mental illnesses or stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But through our discussion, art does seem like a means to describe intensity of emotion, yes, as well as what the emotion is. Because you can describe a warm, sunny day, or you can describe, a beautiful sunny day in a walk through the park, through a song or through a painting, and that would describe it so much more intensely. Or even with the same painting, you can have somebody just paint a sunny day, or somebody and paint their interpretation of the sunny day and how it makes them feel more intensely. And we've all seen photos that were like, oh, that's nice, and then you see ones that you're like, wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's something like it's powerful.
It's powerful.
Yeah,
and it's because it displays a certain intensity of emotion as well as the emotion too, which can be used not only to just get those different reference points from each other, but also to describe a certain intensity that is not really possible just through words. Like, I can say I'm really hurting. Like, I'm very sore right now.
Yeah. But
without the emotional backing behind it, you don't get a true feeling of the intensity of
you don't get the impact of it. You're just like, okay, pain, I get that. But like, what is that pain actually, how does it translate to what you're experiencing? What does it actually mean? Art really conveys that. And being able to convey something that's so elusive almost, it's you experiencing it. You're always constantly within yourself, constantly within your body, and it's just yours. How do you communicate something like that requires empathy to someone else when you yourself cannot feel it? Well, you can feel it through this medium. It's a new sort of conversation on a new level. We're not just talking about facts and, information and knowledge. It's about being able to access the knowledge and experience within ourselves as ourselves, experiencing ourselves. And that has such therapeutic qualities as well. Like when you were saying, talking about mental illness. Well, art therapy exists for a reason. It's very healing to be able to express yourself. It's not only about receiving the art, it's also about giving the art. Giving the art has so much to it, and so many transformative qualities to the individual that creates it.
And like, I think we've discussed this before, but it also being like a universal language.
Yes, it is universal.
That you can look at somebody's art from Central Africa who you can't understand through language at all, and you have such a different view of the world than they do, but you can still see that art and feel what that human feeling is, and what that.
Well, yeah, and I think it's also, it really can help us understand what is it that makes us like human? What is that universal sort of trait that's like throughout the ages that's the same? Well, art's a really good tool to kind of figuring out what it really means to be a human, because you could have art that's like hundreds of years old depicting something that you can understand and is happening in your life. Well, it's not necessarily the culture, it's not necessarily the interest, but it's the emotion that stays the same. It's that if you see this picture depicting, agony and like jealousy or whatever, like we're all capable of those emotions today. It's not hinged on technology or advancements or culture. That is fundamentally us. And I think that's the thing that we need to focus on with one another, because that's a great way to prevent us from othering. Because we all have different interests. We all come from different backgrounds. We all have different cultures. That's never going to be different, and it never should be different. Having this idea that the world is going to be better when we homogenize our values. Like, I don't agree with that. You're inherently going to oppress. You're inherently going to put people in power, and that's when things get abusive. That's when you get right and wrongs, and that's when you have sides and othering and justification for doing things to people because they're wrong and you're right. And I think art is a huge mediator for that.
Yeah, because you can see it even in today's values, or in today's activism, where many of these people are fighting for a righteous cause or a proper cause. They're portraying, or they're putting the point across in a lot of times, violent and harmful ways. And you can see that it doesn't just work to have a righteous cause or have a morally correct cause, because that's a whole different story as to what is moral and what isn't. But despite having a cause that is moral or not, and a lot of people end up resorting to, if they can't describe, they can't portray their own emotions in their work and convey that to a side that's not necessarily unified on their moral ground, that like, if you can't do that, it turns into a violent, either a violent or a angry or a non-helpful situation. Whereas people who are able to portray these thoughts and these to the other side, that if they're able to do that through a means that actually reaches to them, that it's much more powerful. So I can see, not only is it going to be good for everybody to have these different reference points in all these different areas, but it might be either helpful to causes or possibly cause a lot less suffering
Mm-hmm.
and pain with people who are trying to discuss things that they don't agree with necessarily.
Yeah, completely. And I think being able to have a space, I guess, to express what is it that you're feeling. Because people are passionate about things. Like, yeah, activists, why are they so passionate about it? Because something about this is emotionally upsetting. Something about this is angering. At the end of the day, it's not really about the thing in itself. It's what it emotionally does to someone. That's what makes people riled up, angry, and passionate, right? And I think being passionate and being angry about things that you don't feel are just are great. That doesn't need to be removed. What we're missing from the equation is love. And that love can only be accessed through empathy. So with love and anger put together, you can have a very, very passionate society, but it's not a self-destructing society. It's building something. And you do need that fuel of anger. This is not right, and I feel it is not right. I want to change it. I want to create something new that's better. That's great. But once you start to go, and it's this person's fault for this, and they're the worst, and I'm going to justify doing terrible things and saying horrible things about this person because they've become this entity that I can justify apathy. And that's when things get dangerous because we still need to continue to feel empathetic for the other side.
Yeah.
And then you're just dealing with people. You're not dealing with sides anymore. You're not dealing with the embodiment of issues and problems. You're dealing with real people, which is practically what we're doing.
I guess that's art is the I don't know if you want to use the word art, but art is the art of conveying humanity to each other.
I guess instead of art is the art.
Art is the
Maybe,
action
yeah, art is the
Conveying.
action. That's good. I like that. Art is the action.
of conveying humanity to one another.
Yeah, it is.
This world could do more.
Yeah, this world can always do with a lot more of that.
Yeah.
So the more art, the merrier. And also it's that, when you see someone's art, you see it through a song, a poem, a drawing, or whatever, you access a whole other facet to the topic that you wouldn't be able to necessarily through a debate of just, here's are the facts, here's are the things that I feel about those facts, right? You have something that shows this is a real person. I can actually relate to this thing, even though previously I didn't find that person relatable in any sense, right? Like I'm thinking, one thing that comes up in my head is that on YouTube there's that video, I'm Not Racist, that went like super viral, and it was the rap between a white guy and a black guy. And that's art. And being able to so emotionally and seamlessly convey both sides and their emotions and why they are thinking the way they are could only be done through an artistic medium. You could not have conveyed something so emotionally impactful without putting it into a poetic musical format. So yeah, I think it's something that needs to be embedded in our conversation because it's just another level of communication. And we need to be working at all levels that are accessible to us to really get the full picture.
Yeah. I guess one thing that popped in my head right now is we always talk about body language and our verbal language, right? Well, this might be another kind of human language that we use, because if you think through history, we've got tribal dances, we've got cave paintings, we have artistic jewelry, clothing,
food,
even
such
food, yeah.
Food is such a distinct art form. It's like through the ages.
Human appearance.
Different hairstyles and trends and everything, like all of it.
And that's all used to convey language just as powerfully as body language, or just as powerfully as verbals. Like you can see somebody when they walk into the room and they're dressed a certain way, that conveys
It conveys so much about that person.
Right? It's a type of art. If that person shows you a piece of art, he's shown you a piece of himself through no no doing of his own body afterwards. That art itself is a means through which that person communicates.
Yeah,
So yeah,
completely.
it's almost like we're opening up another way of talking, another way of communication.
Yeah, communicating. Yeah, completely.
That we've kind of ignored for a while.
Well, the big thing that bothers me, that drives me to look at art specifically, is how much art isn't taken seriously. Art doesn't have that meaning that it used to have. Art used to be a very revered, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess topic. I don't know. Or I was gonna say art form, but that doesn't make any sense. It's
Popular.
it used to be a revered sort of asset skill, being able to be artistic, because it was so individual. You being able to like just bring out the song that's in you. It's like, wow, that's such a powerful gift that you can bring song to us. And I think a huge part of that is how accessible art has become. It's so great how accessible it's become, but it's almost like we're so complacent. Like, we don't care unless it's something like flawless and like perfect. Like, there's no room in the conversation for bad art. And I disagree with that. You don't need to be skillful. It doesn't need to satisfy anything except for yourself. And it's, yeah.
The one thing that we were talking about a little earlier was conveying art is conveying emotion. But a lot of times there is room for that art to be not necessarily misused, but to be used for a certain end. Just like any communication, right?
Yeah.
But the first thing I thought of was those commercials where you sponsored Child in Africa.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Like where they play the
sad music.
Yeah, the sad
and
music,
everything.
piano music, and they tell you about this kid who can't eat at all, and
Yeah, and he's just covered in flies and
covered in
dirt.
flies,
Yeah.
that's used to portray a certain image to you, and little do you know that some of those companies will spend 70 cents of every dollar to fund their executives or whatever.
Yeah.
However it is. But the same way you can see like top artists, music artists, they tend to do music that applies to the most people, but goes to as little depth as possible. And a lot of times, a lot of those artists that get to the top because they've got the majority of the people.
Yeah. Because they're not bringing anything controversial to the table that will rile people up.
Yeah, but I don't think it's any problem or any fault of their own that they make that, because that's the kind of art they want to make. But I feel like an appreciation of art would allow people to vary what they find interesting. If you're growing up and you're going through hard times, like, you're not going to necessarily gravitate to those more pop, like, happy-go-lucky songs. You might gravitate towards the other ones, but
Like Simple Plan, I'm Not Perfect.
yeah. Exactly. Or When We Were Children.
Oh wait, what is it called? I'm Not Perfect? I don't.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Perfect. Yeah, Jesus.
It's
Okay.
exactly that one. But
perfect. Not. I'm not perfect.
very, very similar.
Yeah.
But I feel like an appreciation of art and a non-judgment of art is also important. Like, don't judge somebody for what they are into their art. Like, if they're into darker stuff, don't be, don't get too depressed off that stuff. If they're into, let's see, poppy stuff, don't be, okay, you're too ditzy, I don't like that. Like,
well, that's the thing. I think people kind of, like, when they look at someone doing something, they think, oh, it's that thing is making them this way. But it's no, you're the creator here. You're the one who goes to these points. So it's not necessarily that song that's super depressing and everything that's making you depressed. It's you who's seeking that. And I think if we really respect, if we really look at each other and what we're interested in, I think we would understand one another and where we're at currently, because we are constantly evolving and changing, and our values, our morals, our experiences, everything is constantly changing. And I think that art is a great way to understand where we're at, you know, from an individual point, but also from a societal point. What is viewed as important and good art now? It's very revealing to what we think, what we as an emotional state, if you were looking at society as this like really big collective human, this is what it's feeling right now. And I think that's a great way to understand where do we really need to go, because there's so many different views, so many things to look at. But I think art is a very revealing aspect of where our society truly is at and what it needs to do to get better for us to all be at that balanced, healthy, happy state that we all strive for and we all are capable and are all deserving of being.
And I think at the same time, there needs to be less of a demonization of feeling emotion.
Yes.
There is definitely, I wouldn't say demonization, but I would say there is that it is a character
There's a lot of
flaw.
stigmatizations and
It's a
issues
character
around our
flaw to a lot
perspective of it.
people, especially men. Like,
Oh,
men,
absolutely.
it's a
Yeah.
huge character flaw for a guy to feel emotion. Like, yeah, everybody loves to see that father cry when his son was injured or something.
Yeah.
But but only when it's that extreme.
Yeah, no,
If it's
there's only
less.
acceptable, like you crying at your daughter's wedding, giving the wedding speech. Well, that's adorable and great, but you like having a mental breakdown at work is like, no,
Yeah.
someone is weak here. Well, it's like, well, no, we shouldn't be saying it's okay to feel this and these very particular sanctioned sort of events, but outside of that, no way.
Exactly.
Like so being a man, I'd like you to kind of describe your relationship throughout your life with emotion and art. You know, what is it like navigating the world as a man through these sort of topics?
In relation to art.
Yeah, relation to art, but also emotion. And are there any times in your life, maybe in your childhood, where art had a large impact on your emotion, or you gravitated towards something particular and it really helped you through a time? What is your specific relationship with art and emotions?
Well, it's a difficult thing to say because, well, for a long time, a lot of my childhood actually was like repressing artistic, feelings, because it's a feeling.
Yeah.
Right? It's not something you want to feel. You don't want to feel because it's against what being male is, right? Being, or toxic masculinity is being that person who never feels, being that person who basically goes through life as a,
You can be angry though.
oh yeah, well, that's not characterized as an emotion because
It's a reaction.
it's seen, uncontrollable reaction.
It's
Which is weird because every emotion really is uncontrollable.
Yeah, and every emotion is a reaction and is an action.
But for some reason, like, anger is allowable because it is like harmful, but also like that weird notion of alpha male.
Yeah, totally.
But from like childhood, I actually really wanted to draw when I was a kid. I remember getting like a lot of drawing booklets and stuff, but I would never know what to draw. And looking back at it now, it wasn't because I didn't know what to draw, but I didn't know what was acceptable to draw. I remember one time I drew a dragon and I was really happy about that. But, never, I would always look at that blank page and instead of just going at it and drawing something, I'd be like, what's good?
Yeah.
What's the right thing to do?
Yeah. Oh,
Which I
people
think-
like to see me draw sort of thing. Yeah.
Which I think was more of at that point I didn't understand it, but looking back at it now, it might be more of a reasoning for like, well, maybe you wanted to have a certain emotion or portray a certain image, because art is so capable of putting out these emotions. You want to make sure you put out the right ones. And a lot of times there wasn't, so I just never did.
Well, and with, there's certain emotions you can and cannot. Well, that fits with imagery, right? What's if I wanted to draw, a field of flowers, and I wanted a butterfly on the flower. Well, as this little boy who's drawing that, we like to come to lots of different conclusions
Yeah.
that are really not necessarily correct, because
Yeah.
why on earth are they feeling all these things that like are unnatural for, you know, a male to feel? These are very female. What's going on, you know?
Anything is unnatural for you. As a kid, you're supposed to stop. You're not allowed to cry. You're not allowed to you know, be loving. Or like, it's very, once you get past like child behavior.
Once you start hitting like kind of
androgynous behavior,
puberty,
yeah,
yeah.
that's when you need to be, you know, you need to be a man now.
Yeah,
Like,
and your
that's the
interests and your
word-
emotions need to be in line
The
with that,
sentence
yeah.
you hear is, you need to be a man. Mm-hmm. I was like bullied very hard when I was a kid, and a lot of times I would, you know, come home and I would cry about this or that. Like a big part of the time would be that they would say, "Oh, just suck it up."
Yeah.
That's how it is. You just don't. You don't have to do anything. Like, you basically just be like a rock and have everything bounce off you.
Yeah.
Which is not possible.
Which isn't possible, just as a human, that's just not possible. And also, why is this a desirable way of living?
Yeah.
Why is being completely emotionless, unaffected, and you can be angry, and you can engage in only these certain things? Why do we voluntarily live like this?
Yeah.
Why are we so self-policing and so self-limiting? We don't even understand fundamentally what our capabilities are, because we are so self-limiting. Besides, from a societal point of view, we as humans self-limit constantly. Our physical capabilities, our artistic capabilities, our, you know, capabilities to engage with other people, connect with them, to perform a certain skill or act or anything. Like, we're constantly telling ourselves, oh, we can't do that or this or whatever. And it's just like, let that go and really engage. And it's so hard to do that, obviously. Like, there's a reason why we're so self-limiting. It is so hard to fully engage in all the things that you really want to do, because after a while, when you've been suppressing these feelings and these desires for so long, you don't even know what you want anymore. You don't even know what you feel.
Well, yeah, because it's I mean, what you feel and what you want are very much similar, right? So
Yeah.
if you always block down what you're feeling,
Yeah, you don't
never know
understand. You
what
just
you want.
don't understand.
like, yeah, like what I was saying before, you're told not to cry, you're told not to be angry. I mean, it's not even don't cry, it's don't be sad. Don't
Right.
be, like, it's,
Don't be the emotion at all.
It's not the tears that are wrong, it's the feeling that's wrong. And that turns into self-policing, mental policing that is so powerful and so strong throughout the ages, that you think you think that's what you are. Like, you don't cry past whatever the age is, and anytime you do cry, it's a break in like, you know, what's good. Like, you shame yourself for every time you do. And then on top of that, like, that just, if you're afraid of emotions that make you look weak or look non-manly or whatever, you shy away from them. But not only them, you shy away from every emotion, because you can't control it. So
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, you can't just selectively control emotions. You gotta just blank it all out.
So you
then.
just dampen anything. I remember one time I was with my brother or one of my friends, and we went like bungee jumping when we were a kid, and I remember standing at the edge, toes on the ledge, about to fall backwards into the canyon, and my friend was like freaking out. They couldn't do, like, they were barely ready to like, they didn't want to jump off. They were scared. And we were standing on the edge, and they told us to lean back, so I just leaned back, and we fell. The whole time they were like screaming, they were terrified, as which, like, you can be, like, that's something that should
Well,
be.
because it's such an extreme situation, you're allowed to be scared.
The whole time I didn't say a single word, I didn't have a single emotion on my face. I fell down, didn't even scream. We got up, and I was like, that's good. Like, that was fun. But I got all the praise for being somebody who was literally showed zero emotion in the face of what your body would perceive as certain death. Whereas the other guy got flack for screaming and all that kind of stuff.
It's like, good job for being rock.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
But But the big thing about that is that you're not in that in that
You're not in the moment
Like,
anymore.
I wasn't.
You have to separate
I
yourself.
can barely remember falling backwards.
Yeah.
And the reason is because I had probably disconnected any kind of conscious thought and just did, right?
Yeah.
And that's harmful.
You completely disconnected from that moment, from yourself, from everything. And then it's just like, what even happened? That's not even a memory. The memory is you disassociating.
Yeah.
It's not about the feelings, the adrenaline, the experience, and the whoa. And for disassociating, you were rewarded.
And that's not the only time. Like,
exactly. It's a constant reinforcement of like, wow, and I've gotten it too. Like the amount, like as a kid, I would get it all the time where it's like, oh, you're so low maintenance, you don't get like bothered by anything, like you're such a man, and it was such a compliment. Like so good that nothing could ruffle your feathers. You never, when you want to cry, you hold it in and you wait till you're home alone in your bed and no one knows about it.
Yeah.
Like good job.
But even if you do that, you're wrong.
Oh,
Like,
you feel wrong while you do it, right?
Even the act of crying when there's not even a single person who would ever hear your
You
songs or
know,
anything,
yeah, you know it in yourself.
you
You're wrong.
Are angry at yourself.
Yeah,
for doing
completely.
That. So,
Yeah, you're like this moment of weakness. Feel shamed. If anyone saw me, oh man, it would be just a complete devastation.
Yeah.
And like that's definitely not the environment you
it's-
want to
it's
be.
not the appropriate
Yeah,
environment for
well,
anybody
it
to grow up.
convolutes your emotions as well.
Yeah.
It doesn't even allow you, like, every emotion essentially gets mixed with guilt and shame and humiliation when none of that needs to be there.
Exactly. And I think translating this back to art, the original question. I remember I used to be in choir when I was a kid,
Yes.
and I used to love drawing and stuff like that. I remember there was a big section of my life where that was no longer anything. I took part in sports, and I played rugby, football, swimming. I did track and field. I did soccer. I did field hockey. I did everything. But I never even once went back into the artistic mediums that I had been interested in.
Right.
And not to say that I didn't like doing all those sports, but
No, I mean, you're allowed to be a multifaceted human being.
But there was a distinct lack of this other thing,
Right.
that should have been. I should have been interested in. Like only now I'm getting back into like singing, and only now I'm getting back into trying out art again.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of barriers you have to go through.
Yeah, there's a lot of residual feelings. I mean, you don't just snap out of something like that. And I think that's why I'm also doing this show, to really emphasize on how it is hard to do this, especially going through the conditionings that we do as individuals and how we do self-police. And we're going through all of these, this is good and this is bad. You can't switch that off right away. And, taking up an art form as well, like you can't just pick up a pencil and start drawing at the level that you're envisioning and desiring. You can't pick up an instrument and do that. It takes practice and work and, getting to understand that, well, this is a lot to take on for someone. And the only way that someone will take on something like that is to understand how important it is.
I also think it's really important to have a male, at least for boys, to have a male in their life that is very invested in art, because that shows that it's okay. That shows that, hey, you can love doing something artistic and doing something emotional, and it's still being, acceptable.
Oh, absolutely,
behavior, right?
yeah.
Like, nobody in my family, the majority of things you'll ever hear from a guy when it comes to art, it's like, oh, I'm not good at any of that stuff. Like, I've never been good at that.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not for me.
Yeah, it isn't. Yeah, it's not.
It's not.
I'm just not an artistic person.
I'm not one of those guys who can do all those fancy art things.
Fancy dancing.
Yeah, they strive away from it. They even say that it's not part of their life. They can't have any part of it.
Yeah.
They might like a song or two, but it's not that they love songs, or love an art.
Yeah, like I love the music and this and that or whatever, but it's like, yeah, I like it. It's good.
So like it's important to have those people who are interested, who are taking part in that kind of stuff, and really.
Yeah, what I think is what's really important is to, now that we live in a society where we do have a platform that virtually anyone can contribute to, I think it's really important to have, like, everyone needs someone they can relate to as a role model, right? If you identify as, heterosexual, like, male, you are seeking a heterosexual male role model because you relate to them. You're like, hey, this is kind of my identity, and you showing me you can expand your identity into these things. Well, heck, I feel so much more comfortable, right?
That's right.
Like, watching a man woodwork is like, I can appreciate his woodworking ability, but if I see a woman doing it, suddenly it strikes a chord in my identity and says, you can do this too.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think because our identity is on such a wide spectrum, and what is it that you individually associate with is very different. You could associate with being South African far more than with being male, right? Or, vice versa. So the people that you feel like your role models might change on how you feel about yourself. If I see, like, a Ukrainian person doing something, I'm not necessarily as swayed as when I see a woman, or even a woman of my stature, doing something that's, I previously limited myself on. That has a lot more significance to me. But someone else, let's say if someone, I don't know, is an ethnic minority in where they're living, that ethnicity, they might identify with that much more so than their sexual orientation.
That's right. So pretty much what it is
we need everyone to be able to express themselves and be role models /
for whoever looks up to them.
Exactly.
And what that requires is not that we make more. Let's get more, South African role models up there. Let's get more. Let's have everybody take part.
Yeah,
That in itself will cause more.
It'll create more role models.
Cause
it's a chain effect.
Yeah, a domino effect, having more and more people join in and take part. So.
Well, exactly. It's so infectious, and I find that with doing this show, I get to interact with lots of passionate and creative people. It really does inspire myself to engage in these things, because all of these people come from all these different backgrounds, do all sorts of different things, and it's just like, wow, the options are endless. And like, it's great, and it has a real effect on myself, and I'm no different than anyone else, right? The more people that get to see more different things, and different things that they relate to and don't relate to, just having that spectrum of things to be exposed and experience towards is just helpful for everything.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Yeah, and well, with the emotions, I meant to bring this up. I forgot about it now. I remember it. But with emotions, it's particularly hard because there's a lot of complex emotions that make you feel vulnerable, right? Feeling safe and comfortable to express vulnerability is huge and is extremely delicate, because it doesn't take much to take that trust away, to no longer feel like I can be vulnerable. So I think art and its acceptance, and for us to see its importance, will also help one another feel safe being vulnerable.
Especially because there will always be people who could take advantage of that vulnerability.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what it is that you use you have more there in support than you do in, removing that or hurting.
Well, I think, there's going to be people who ruin good things all the time. Who cares? I don't even, it's just the way it is. But when you really look at it, like, why is this person taking advantage of their vulnerability? I guarantee you that person who does that, who, misuses people's trust, do you think they're ever vulnerable to anyone else?
Well,
no.
Everybody always says, bullies are the ones who are typically the ones who have the most vulnerabilities that they have that they don't want to show.
Exactly.
Right?
I can guarantee you the people who prey on people's vulnerabilities will never show their own. And as art inherently makes you vulnerable, are you really going to be capable of misusing someone else's vulnerability when you yourself are vulnerable, that you yourself know and experience and value that vulnerability? Highly likely not. Unless you're a psychopath, which is a small majority of the population, so really it's just an outlier. But on the majority of people out there, that rule makes sense.
Yeah, is that since everybody's encouraged to show
and you are showing, yeah,
and be vulnerable, it's almost a safeguard against the misuse of that. For, because us as a social creature, part of, being part of the whole thing is taking part in social actions and stuff like that. So even if you're somebody who doesn't take part in the whole artistic boom, if you want to call it that, you'd almost be at a disadvantage socially for not being part. So it's almost it's kind of like safeguarding itself in a way.
Yeah, and I think art is an integral part of being a healthy, balanced, healthy human being. And when you're genuinely happy and healthy and you're able to be vulnerable and feel safe, you don't have malicious desires to screw someone else over. You don't have apathetic justifications for doing bad things to people. When you are in that mental landscape, you're essentially incapable of doing evil things to other people. And that's really fundamentally, people say, there are bad people and there are good people in the world. I don't believe that. There are only people who become good or bad. And I think that this is a huge part of allowing people to enact being good. Because there's plenty of situations that really, it's only reasonable that they're enacted into a bad person. But the more that we allow that growth within ourselves, the healthier we will all be.
You can always look at it like when you encounter a stray dog. When you first encounter a stray dog, they might bite you. They might growl at you. They might be, everything that's a bad dog.
Yeah, they
right?
might, yeah.
But the second that you bring them food or you take them out of that state of vulnerability, a lot of those dogs become the nicest.
Yeah, the best dogs ever.
The best pets ever. And yeah, there are some dogs that need more work than others, but it's because the amount of vulnerability that they have is much more, right? And they need much more coaxing, much more understanding, and that kind of stuff. But eventually,
But that's key, right? How do you get that dog out of that state? Is it a bad dog? Are they biting you because they want to hurt you and they that's what they want to do? They just want to bite you? Yeah. No, they're anxious. They're scared. They're being defensive. They won't allow themselves to be vulnerable and trusting with you, and that's why they behave that way. Well, how do you get them to not do that? You don't hit them and tell them they're the worst thing ever and that they need to be this way. No, you give them understanding. You treat them with empathy. You give them things that you would yourself want. And then suddenly that dog is no longer a bad dog. It's a good dog. People are the exact same way. You can't throw apathy at someone like that and expect them to return empathy to you.
So what then you would be at this point. We're looking at that analogy. So having a bad dog turn good. That's kind of what Cesar Millan's doing.
Yeah.
And he's the dog whisperer.
Yes, he is the dog whisperer.
And what you'd like to do is turn people from bad.
I'm the human whisperer.
You're the human whisperer.
Oh my
Maybe
God.
that should be your new show name.
The human
The human
whisperer.
whisperer.
Oh my God. Yes, that is exactly what I'm trying to say. But I'm
Yeah.
also trying to say is that, we keep talking about kind of an external, something external creating that change.
Mm-hmm.
And really what I want to really press upon is that we in ourselves have the power to stop engaging in these things, to stop being a part of that environment, and to change ourselves. And with that, when you are fundamentally changing yourself, your environment will follow. You don't, because lots of people are like, well, I have the worst life ever, and I have abusive parents and blah 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 blah. But you can break out of it. You can do something. You can gain autonomy, and this is, I think, a fundamental tool to gaining that autonomy over yourself. Because if you're experiencing bliss and everything, like, it doesn't even matter what's happening around you.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, you could look at a sunset or a sunrise, anything, beautiful sight, essentially. And you could look at it and it could feel dull, it could feel depressing, it could feel all of those things. Then someone else comes along and looks at the same thing and it's like the most blissful, awing, significant experience. Why? It's because of the internal landscape within ourselves.
Yeah, like that double rainbow guy.
Exactly. He was amped. He was ready to go. Do you think everyone was thinking that with the double rainbow? Definitely not. Definitely not.
No, but he loved it.
He loved it, and it was great.
That's right.
You know what? And it was great to watch someone loving it. I love watching people loving life and doing something great, engaging something that's genuinely interesting and gives them so much passion. It's contagious. Whenever you watch something like that, you feel inspired after. Well, it's not a coincidence. And that's the kind of effect we ourselves can have. We have that power to be that powerful of a person, to go into a place and people are like, wow, like, that was inspiring. That stirred something in me. We all have the ability to stir something within each other.
No, I agree with that. It also makes it so much better when you see somebody who enjoys their art, who actually loves art. It makes you much more, you like that art more. If you hear somebody singing an emotional song, but singing it with an emotion behind it.
Yes,
kind of
there's such a
feeling behind
genuine feeling behind it. You're like, I don't even care. I genuinely don't care about people, like, their specific art form. Like, we watched a show on Netflix of a girl making bugs into, like, movie characters and dressing them up and, like, everything. If someone just showed me, hey, what do you think of this? I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
But, like, seeing her so involved and so passionate, and I was like, this is super cool now.
Yeah.
This got way cooler seeing how into it you are and your thought process behind it and everything. And it's like, yeah, I feel like a lot of people could appreciate so many art forms if they had that true, genuine feeling behind it. And we actually acknowledged it. We acknowledged that there is that genuine feeling behind it. Because that also will help us not judge things where it's like, I don't like that. This is weird. This is stupid. I don't get it. And, that's really painful to the artist. And I think the more that we all engage in art, we'll all understand that sort of emotional vulnerability that is just embedded in art and appreciate that.
It's okay not to like.
Yeah, it's totally fine not to like art. Like, by all means, that is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But just understanding what that art really means, I think, is important.
Going through all that, and what the meaning is, and I guess seeing the human as well as the art.
Exactly, seeing the human as well as the art. I couldn't agree more. All right. Well, thank you, Estian, for joining us today, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.